The year is 36 BC. Han General Chen Tang crests the final ridge and stares down at the fortress below. He's traveled 5,000 miles from the Chinese frontier to reach this moment. What he sees defies everything he knows about warfare. The fortress sits on the Talas River in what is now Kazakhstan. There's a double defense system, an inner earthen wall typical of Central Asia. But surrounding it is something alien, a wooden palisade built from interlocking logs. No Xiongnu warlord builds like this. Then the gates open. 100 cavalry ride out in the familiar nomad show of force. But behind them, something impossible happens. Another 100 infantry emerge and form a tight, disciplined square on both sides of the entrance. Shields locked together, they move as one unit, conducting precise military drills before battle. This is the legendary Roman testudo formation, the signature of the legions, holding a defensive line impossibly far from Italy. For 17 years, no one knew what happened to them. This is the story of 10,000 lost Romans and the battle that solved the mystery. 17 years earlier, in 53 BC, Marcus Licinius Crassus led 7 Roman legions into the desert near Carrhae. Over 40,000 elite soldiers marched into what would become one of Rome's most catastrophic defeats. Crassus wasn't fighting for the Republic. This was personal ambition, a grab for military glory to match his fellow triumvirs, Pompey and Caesar. He was the richest man in Rome, but wealth wasn't enough. He wanted the kind of legendary victories that would put his name alongside theirs in history. The Parthian general Surena waited with just 10,000 cavalry, 9,000 horse archers, and 1,000 cataphracts, heavy cavalry encased in armor. The mathematics seemed impossible. Rome outnumbered Parthia 4-1, but mathematics don't account for tactics. The Parthians unleashed their signature move, the Parthian shot. Wave after wave of arrows darkened the sky. The Roman formations were built for close combat, shield walls designed to crush enemies in hand-to-hand fighting. They couldn't reach their tormentors. When the legions tried to advance, the Parthian cavalry simply rode away, shooting backwards as they retreated. It was psychological warfare as much as military strategy. The Romans could never close the distance. They could never bring their superior numbers and discipline to bear. Hour after hour, the arrows kept coming. The desert sun blazed down. Water ran out. Roman auxiliary forces crumbled first. These weren't professional legionaries, they were local recruits. Less disciplined, less committed. Then panic spread to the legions themselves. When the Romans were finally exhausted, dehydrated, and demoralized, the cataphracts charged. 1,000 heavy cavalry smashed into 40,000 infantry who no longer had the strength or will to resist. The formations shattered. Men broke and ran. The disciplined Roman war machine disintegrated into scattered groups of desperate survivors. The butcher's bill was devastating. 20,000 Romans died in the sand. 10,000 more escaped westward, carrying news of the disaster back to Rome. But 10,000 soldiers, an entire legion's worth, were captured alive, along with their sacred eagles. Crassus himself was killed during a parley. The Parthians had invited him to negotiate, then ambushed him. His head was severed and sent to the Parthian king as a trophy. Rome had lost one of its most powerful men and an entire army in a single afternoon. But what happened to those 10,000 prisoners? History went silent. The Roman poet Horace mocked them years later, writing that Crassus's soldiers were still alive, shameful husbands to barbarian wives, serving their father-in-law kings. But where were they? What had become of Rome's finest infantry? The answer lay in Parthian strategy. These weren't ordinary captives. They were trained Roman legionaries, the finest heavy infantry in the world. Men who'd spent years mastering formations, weapons drill, and battlefield discipline. The Parthians faced a choice: execute them or find a way to use them. Executing 10,000 men would waste valuable military assets. These soldiers represented years of training and combat experience, but keeping them on the western frontier near Roman territory was suicide. These soldiers knew Roman tactics, Roman weaknesses, Roman plans. They'd spent their entire military careers preparing to fight alongside and against other Roman legions. If kept anywhere near the Roman frontier, they'd defect at the first opportunity, a Roman rescue mission would be welcomed with open arms. So the Parthians made a calculated decision. According to Pliny the Elder, they settled the Roman captives in the province of Margiana, in the ancient city of Merv. This was the eastern frontier, thousands of miles from Roman territory. Merv sat at the crossroads between the Iranian plateau, the Afghan mountains, and the northern steppes. It was a strategic location where trade routes converged, where caravans needed protection from raiders. More importantly, it was isolated. No Roman army could reach that far east to rescue their lost soldiers. For 17 years, these Roman veterans served Parthian masters. Their military skills were put to use defending distant oases and trade caravans. They married local women, raised children who would never see Italy, and slowly adapted to life on the edge of the known world. They trained in Parthian tactics, learned to fight alongside cavalry instead of against it. But they never forgot their Roman discipline. The formations, the drills, the systematic approach to warfare. These things were burned into them after years in the legions. But empires shift, borders change. And in 36 BC, a desperate warlord named Zhiji Chanyu was fleeing west after losing a civil war to his brother. He needed soldiers. The Parthians had trained Roman infantry they were willing to rent out. The collision course was set. Roman military expertise, honed in the legions and tempered by 17 years of frontier warfare, was about to face the most disciplined army in the East, the forces of the Han Empire. Neither side knew they were about to fight the only battle in history between Rome's finest infantry and China's military machine. Meanwhile, 5,000 miles to the east, a different kind of desperation was brewing in the Han Empire's western frontier. Chen Tang, the newly appointed vice commander of the Protectorate of the Western Regions, was a man with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Unlike the celebrated Han generals, men like Huo Chubing or Li Guangli, who came from powerful aristocratic families, Chen Tang was dirt poor, so poor that in his youth he survived by borrowing money and begging from neighbors. So poor that when his debts piled up, he was publicly shamed in his hometown. But poverty had sharpened his mind like a blade. Chen Tang possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of military strategy and frontier politics. He knew every trade route, every tribal alliance, every weakness in the vast network of Central Asian kingdoms. When news reached him that Zhiji Chanyu had built a fortress deep in Kangju territory, Chen Tang saw something his superiors missed. This wasn't just another barbarian stronghold, this was opportunity. The fortress sat on the Talas River in what is now Kazakhstan. From the Han capital of Chang'an, the straight-line distance was over 3,000 kilometers. The actual march would cover 5,000 kilometers. Like a Roman legion marching from Rome to Western India, beyond even Alexander's conquests. Any army from Chang'an would face a logistical nightmare. First, the Taklamakan Desert, the Sea of Death, where armies could march for weeks between tiny oases. Then the Pamir Mountains with peaks over 4,000 meters high, where altitude sickness and extreme weather killed more soldiers than enemy arrows. During a previous campaign against Taiwan, a Han army of tens of thousands had been reduced to just a few thousand survivors by the time it limped home. But Chen Tang wasn't thinking about marching from Chang'an. He was thinking like a frontier commander. The Protectorate of the Western Regions maintained its own garrison troops. Veteran soldiers adapted to brutal conditions, equipped with the finest Han military technology. Full sets of lamellar armor, ring pommel swords, halberds, and most importantly, the devastating Han crossbow. According to military records, one fully equipped Han soldier was worth roughly 10 nomadic warriors. Chen Tang's plan was revolutionary. Instead of waiting for reinforcements from the capital, a process that would take a year, he would mobilize the existing frontier garrisons. Then, under the authority of the Protectorate, he would conscript troops from the vassal states and allied kingdoms. The Western regions had 48 city-states and small kingdoms under Han influence. Their leaders held official seals from the Han court, accepting direct imperial authority. Chen Tang could call upon their armies. His superior, Protector General Ganyan Shu, thought the plan was brilliant, but he wanted to report it to the emperor and wait for permission. A message to Chang'an and back would take 6 months minimum. Chen Tang knew that 6 months meant losing the opportunity forever. Zhiji might flee, or winter might make the mountain passes impassable, or the political situation might shift. There was only one solution, and it was treason. Chen Tang forged an imperial edict in the emperor's name. He began conscripting over 40,000 soldiers from across the western regions. When Gan Yanshu discovered what was happening, Chen Tang confronted his superior with a sword in his hand. "The arrow is already on the bowstring," he declared. "The great army is about to march. Do you intend to stop them with your own strength alone?" It was the ultimate gamble. If Chen Tang succeeded, he would be hailed as a hero who eliminated the Han's greatest enemy. If he failed, he would be executed as a traitor who had plunged the empire into an unauthorized war. The Han army advanced in two columns, crossing the Pamirs from north and south. The southern column passed through Dayuan territory, while the northern column marched through Wusun lands, crushing a small Kangju force along the way. When the columns reunited deep in Kangju territory, they presented an unstoppable force. The Han commanders forbade any looting or hostile actions against local populations. Under this combination of overwhelming might and disciplined restraint, many Kangju nobles who resented Jiji's brutal rule defected to provide intelligence and supplies. Jiji Chanyu was utterly shocked when scouts reported the Han invasion. His advisors urged immediate flight, but he feared that leaving the fortress with only a small retinue would expose him to Kangju ambushes. He decided to make his stand, hoping the far-traveled Han army would exhaust their supplies. Desperate to buy time, Jiji sent envoys offering to send his own son to Chang'an as a hostage. But Chen Tang could taste victory. He replied coldly, "The Son of Heaven has heard you are living in this poor, remote land and fears you are uncomfortable. He has sent us to welcome you and your family back." When the Han army finally arrived, Chen Tang made camp 3 miles away by the Talas River. Then came the moment that proved everything. 100 Xiongnu cavalry rode out in the familiar nomad show of force, galloping back and forth to intimidate the enemy. But what happened next defied every expectation about steppe warfare. Another 100 infantry emerged from the gates and formed up in what the Han records called a fish-scale formation on both sides of the entrance. These weren't scattered barbarian fighters. They moved with mechanical precision, shields interlocking, conducting disciplined pre-battle drills. This was the smoking gun. Nomads didn't have heavy infantry. They didn't use tight formations. Only Roman legionaries were trained for this exact tactical display. But facing 40,000 Han soldiers, Roman discipline meant nothing against Chinese firepower. Chen Tang ordered his crossbowmen to unleash a volley. The 100 infantry and cavalry immediately retreated into the city. To the deafening roar of war drums, the Han army launched an all-out assault from every direction. Han garrison troops advanced behind massive shields, while crossbowmen rained bolts on the defenders. Auxiliary forces filled the moat and blockaded the gates. Under the sky-darkening storm of arrows, defenders on the earthen wall were quickly wiped out. The Han brought up firewood and set the wooden stockade ablaze. At night, desperate Jiji attempted a cavalry charge through the gates, only to be annihilated by waiting crossbow volleys. Jiji himself, clad in armor, fought on the walls alongside his armed wives and concubines. An arrow wounded him in the face. Most of his consorts died around him. By midnight, the outer wooden wall was completely consumed by fire. A relief force of 10,000 Kangju cavalry arrived and launched several charges, but they were merely moving targets for Han crossbows. After suffering heavy casualties, they abandoned Jiji and fled. At dawn, the Han army launched its final assault. Soldiers swarmed over the earthen walls. Street fighting followed. Jiji retreated to his palace, but Han soldiers pursued him. In fierce close quarters combat, Jiji Chanyu was mortally wounded and beheaded. He became the first and only Xiongnu supreme ruler killed in battle by the Han. The final count: 118 killed, 145 captured alive. Those 145 survivors likely included the last Roman legionaries, 17 years after Carrhae. Fixed positions become death traps when facing superior mobility and firepower. Chen Tang's declaration echoed through history. Let those who dare challenge the great Han be hunted down no matter how far they run.